Well, good morning. I like that song. That's a good song, wouldn't you guys say? The anticipation of God doing good stuff, eh? In thinking about this song and the spirit of that, I think the talk this morning kind of projects that spirit as well. We're going to talk about the involvement of the next generation, our youth, in church, and what that looks like, and what we can do as families, what we can do as a church to be a part of that, and to mentors and pass on our faith to the young people. We're gonna look at Hebrews chapter 12. So in the light of making this a youth-friendly service, take out your cell phones if you want, guys. And if you've got Bible apps on there, click on your Bible app. Go to Hebrews chapter 12, starting at verse 1. But make sure your cell phones are off and silent, so then we'll be not distracted, and we'll be good to go. So Hebrews chapter 12, we'll start by reading that. It's talking about faith. It says this: "Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, who's the author and perfecter of faith, who, for the joy set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God." Now, we're not sure who the author of Hebrews is. All of our scholarly material that's out there, we're not sure who the author of Hebrews is. But one thing that we can be sure of is that he had a major concern that God's people understand what true faith is all about. And when we put this passage into the context, we hear him say, hey, look, therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, well, this cloud of witnesses, quote unquote, comes from the previous chapter, chapter 11. These are, and he describes the men and women of faith from the Old Testament that we read there. First of all, he gives a description of what faith is in Hebrews 11, verse 1, saying, "Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen." And there's some pretty heavy-hitting words in that passage alone, right there. Words like assurance, conviction. You know, faith is something that reaches right down into the core of our being. Faith is something that it's real, it's part of who we are. It encompasses our beliefs and our convictions, our hopes and our dreams. True faith is powerful, and it's life-giving. And then the author gives a demonstration of many examples of men and women of faith. And these people like Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, these are all people of faith. The list goes on, and it's a full chapter of people who lived by faith and what they did by faith in God. And these are the cloud of witnesses. These people are part of this cloud of witnesses. Then he goes on and says to us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin. It's a personal thing back to us. Hey, since we have this example, hey, what about us? How should we then follow in step? And then, of course, he leads us to Jesus. He says we should fix our eyes on Jesus, who is, in fact, the author and perfecter of our faith. It seems pretty clear that the author of Hebrews is saying that, hey, it's important to have godly role models. It's important to see a life of authentic faith that's actually lived out by the power of God in the lives of men and women who have gone before us. Simply because we can learn from them. We can gain wisdom from their lives. We can learn what it means to truly walk by faith, to live authentically, and to have life to its fullest. You know, as the resident pastor here to youth and young adults, I've been learning more and more just how important this principle really is. And I can see the difference that it makes in the lives of young people between those who have godly role models and those who don't. It's easy to start recognizing the patterns and the trends between young people who have those godly role models and the ones that don't. You've probably heard in recent days, there's these numbers being thrown about the number of young people who are leaving the church once they're moved out of home, gone from mom and dad, and out there on their own, college, university, work, whatever. And some of these numbers are like crazy high estimates. So the numbers have varied. There hasn't been exact research done till very recently, but the numbers have varied from as low as 50% of our young people leaving the church, and as high as 85%. And these are the young people who have been born and raised in the church and have had regular church attendance, coming here with the family. And these same young people, then they head off to college or they go for work, and what's mind-boggling is that it's the majority. It's not a minority. It's the majority of young people leaving the church. Most reactions to these ideas, these thoughts, these numbers, well, at first are like shock and awe, like, why is this happening? It's worrying and it's concerning to think that it would be normal, quote unquote, for over half of our children or young people to leave the church when they've moved out. And that's normal. That's the trend across North America in these years. Well, the obvious question is, well, why? Why is this happening? Why are the majority of young people leaving the church when they move out of home? What's happening in their lives that's causing this trend? Or rather, we might ask, what's not happening in their lives that's causing this trend? Is something missing? This past month, there was an article in Faith Today magazine. Most of you have probably heard of Faith Today magazine. There was an article that addressed this issue, and the title of this article was simply, "Why They're Leaving." And it was an article that's based on a new report that's been out there, just very, very recent, that I got a chance to look at myself. And this report was put out by the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada, along with other partners such as InterVarsity and Youth for Christ as well, doing an examination of the Canadian idea of this idea here, and what the Canadian numbers would look like in terms of these young people leaving. And the report is called Hemorrhaging Faith. Hemorrhaging Faith. And the report is it's a short 139-page report, which gives survey statistics and analysis that includes information that they received from over 2,000 young adults aged 18 to 34 that they surveyed in Canada. I decided to download this report and see if I could go through it myself and check it out and give it a read. And you know what? There are some interesting trends that this study reveals and confirms. So here's three. The first interesting trend is that when we're talking about students leaving, we're talking about church attendance. When the report is talking about church attendance. It's not necessarily that these people are dropping their faith entirely, but we're looking at just regular church attendance. And in evangelical churches, they would say only 4 out of 10 young adults responded as saying that they still attend church services at least weekly. So 4 out of 10 will move off from home and will attend church regularly on their own. When they're out, they're on their own. 4 in 10. And that's from the evangelical tradition. When they actually looked at the Catholic and mainline church tradition too, the numbers were actually far lower, as few as only 1 in 10 who have been raised in that tradition are attending church services at least weekly. So that seems to be their growing trend from this survey of over 2,000 young adults in Canada. A second trend is this, is that the percentage of young people attending church services drops as they grow older. So in our evangelical tradition, the respondents said 70% of the young adults who were surveyed said that they were regular attendees of church as children, so up to the age of 12. 70% said, yes, we attended church regularly as children. But when they bumped up in the age group to high schoolers, teenagers, that number of 70% dropped down to 52%. Only 52% of these young adults surveyed said, yes, we attended church regularly, at least weekly, in our teenage years. But then that number drops even more as young adults. When we bump the age group up to young adults beyond 18, the number drops to just 39%. And there's where our 4 out of 10 comes in. Only 39% of young adults say that even though they've been raised in the church, they only attend church regularly, weekly. 39% of them is that trend. So the trend is that the numbers are dwindling as people are growing older. We're not getting stronger. The third trend that is also somewhat revealing, actually, is that students are getting lost in the transition points of life and in church ministry. I'll actually read a quote from the Faith Today article about this significance of transition points, because they put it pretty clearly here. They say, the significance of transition points, which are those pivotal moments that change a youth's life, become because of changing circumstances in their home life or church, and or significant birthdays that move them from one age group and one church program to another, may be one of the most startling insights provided by this report. A fellow by the name of Bruno Discorsi, who is a Montreal-based cultural sociologist, oversaw the Francophone portion of this project, and he wants to highlight that, he quotes, one thing that was very important and true for all of Canada, but especially Quebec, is that the moment the young adults grew from children to young teenagers, or teenagers to young adult, that is where we lost them most of the time. Transition times are critical. Reginald Bibby is another sociologist based out of Alberta, and he wasn't involved in the research and writing of this report, but he read it at Faith Today's request, and as a veteran of Canadian surveys on religion, his point of view was this. He says the importance of transitions point caught his attention. He's saying the fact that when we are looking at the decline between childhood and teen is greater than the subsequent teen to young adult drop-off. And that blows our stereotype right there. It says, transitions that open the exit doors of the church for youth aren't just about birthdays. The report showed something very important, that transitions are not just when youth go off to college, but transitions are also when they experience what they experience going on around them in the church. Like, for example, perhaps a youth pastor leaves and a church just isn't church anymore to them, so they stop going. They say, we lose more kids transitioning between Sunday school and youth programs than from teenagers to young adults. Sometimes they suspect that is because it's when parents give them the freedom to choose whether or not they go to church. One of the co-authors of the report says, they've never been in the service. We've spent years teaching them that there's nothing going on of interest to them upstairs during the service. Then they age out of Sunday school, so why would they be suddenly interested in what we are doing? Young adults experience culture shock, and anyone who experiences culture shock wants to go home. The very basic reason you come to church on Sunday is to say thank you to God for your salvation, but the fundamental reason most youth come is because mom is dragging you. How true is that? Reginald Bibby goes on to say this, and one last quote of his. He says, when I look at their patterns of staying, leaving, and returning, the findings are the same as we're finding for the population as a whole. It's relational links and the involvement that touches family life and their own life. Those relational links are so critically important. At the end of the day, my overarching interpretation is that this whole question of who will stay and who will go depends on people being able to define their involvement as worthwhile. If they can find worthwhile ministry, they will be involved. If they can't, no one will. Beyond these trends, this report called Hemorrhaging Faith, it gives a description. They give a description of what they call 4 different spiritual types. It's not just that there are youth that are just completely rejecting the church, and there's youth that are staying with the church. It's not just the 2 sides. They have actually 4 different types. And in fact, of those who responded, who would call themselves the first type as the rejectors, that actually say, church is bad, church is not for me, I don't want to go back ever again, only 15% make up that group. You can compare that to the 23% of those who are labeled as engagers, and those are the 23% who stay with the church and engage with the church and involved in the church. But then there's actually 2 groups that they kind of classify that are kind of the middle ground in between those 2, between the engagers, between the rejectors. And they make up the rest, the fence sitters and the wanderers. They say that fence sitters make up about 36% of the young adult population, and they are described as desiring to have church, but on their own terms. The remaining 26% then comprise the last group called the wanderers, and the wanderers are those who are described as thinking that, church is not for me, at least not at this point in my life. So you got the engagers, the fence sitters, the wanderers, and the rejectors, and a fairly even spread in terms of percentages. But you know what? There's so many numbers that there's 139 pages of numbers and analysis that we could go through. But it's not my intention to get bogged down with those numbers and all that kind of analysis and what do we do? What the strategies that we have to be doing and what should we be changing as a church or whatever. There's so much in there that it's you couldn't even touch the surface in a 30-minute message on a Sunday morning. But I'd like to read a small passage again from this article that really kind of summarizes the report really well. And in fact, it identifies some key factors that help drive young people, back to the church or keep them into the church. And the article says this. It says, the Hemorrhaging Faith report, it identifies 4 major reasons why youth find their church worthwhile and stay or return back to it. And these drivers to church involvement are, first, spiritually engaged parents; second, experiences of God; third, a vibrant community; and fourth, empowering teachings and beliefs. Now, of course, each has a flip side. A barrier, they say, would be identifying the barrier factors would be spiritually disengaged parents, a lack of experiences of God, stagnant community, and restrictive teachings and belief. Restrictive teachings rather than empowering teachings. You look at those 4 and you can really kind of narrow down those 4 to, well, we got family and we got church. And where do those kind of fit in? They talk about family a little bit here. They say, they actually say, the title here is Parents Outweigh Church. They say parents probably don't feel they're influential, but in long-term stability of spiritual centeredness, the family is actually more important than the church. If you look at these drivers and these barriers, the power of modeling and the consistency of life and the transmission of values, there's no greater predictor for spiritual perseverance than the family that you're brought up in. And they say the church probably needs to spend some time thinking about how they can assist parents in the nurturing of kids in some dimension of spiritual formation. They also talk briefly about the church too, and they say authenticity comes up again and again in this report, within the home, but also inside the church doors. They say we need to be a church that creates a place that admits we haven't arrived yet ourselves. We're not finished. We're not there yet. If we just confess that, young people will say, I can actually still belong there. they can actually still belong there. Which is kind of neat, I thought, because as you know, our church's motto is a place to belong. Even in our own youth group here, last year we changed. Well, we didn't really have a name other than Maranatha Church Youth Group, Senior High Youth Group, but we decided to. It was actually a students' initiative to let's put a name to our youth group so that we can kind of label it and brand it and put it out there and whatnot. And many of you probably have heard that the name that we've chosen for our youth group is My Place, M-Y Place. And there was a number of different suggestions. We actually took a whole poll and took votes and whatever, and there were some really neat names that were in there, like Resonate or Get Real or Soul Surfers and stuff like that. You know, teenagers can be pretty creative at times. And but My Place, capital M, capital Y, Place, was the one that won out. And My Place stands for, the M stands for Maranatha, the Y stands for Youth Place, Maranatha Youth Place. It really fits in to the whole, the motto, the vision of our church as a whole, too. It's not just a place for pizza. It's a place for building friendships. It's a place for having experiences of God in a real way. And as a staff person in charge of that, I love my profession in being able to do those kind of things and to guide these young people into those places where they experience God in a very real way, as part of a community that meets over there in the youth hall every Wednesday night. And it's good. You know what? It's good. One word I would say about these 4 key factors. You know, I just read those key factors in there. The engaged parents, the vibrant community, experiences of God, and empowering teachings and belief. It's not these 4 things. They're not a mathematical equation to lead that would lead to, okay, a young person's going to stay in church. It's not, okay, I can check off that, and yeah, I think that's why I'm still in the church. They're good indicators, but they're not. It's not the mathematical equation to let's keep young people in the church. However, they certainly help along, because let's be honest. There are young adults who have had almost none of these things. Could check off very few of these things, these factors that were part of their lives, and yet they're here today among us as regular attendees and living lives that demonstrate true faith, a faith that's alive. So it's not a checklist. And you know what? There will simply be some young people who leave the church regardless of having so many positive influences. It just happens. The flip side of that coin is that there will be young people that are the evidence of the work of God in their lives, not having these things. And it's the kind of power that God is able to sustain. He's able to protect and uphold young people even throughout difficult life circumstances. So in talking about family and church, my thoughts are, as a parent, my faith needs to be authentic. My faith needs to be real. It needs to be alive. I can't be content to simply, read a Bible story to my daughter before bedtime, or to simply say grace before meals. Not that those are bad; those are good. But my faith needs to be so alive and real to me that my daughter picks up on that almost automatically. My faith is not in mere words. It's not in the words and the routines that I do. It's not in the catechism, that we've learned. Our faith is not in the doctrine that we believe. In fact, Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians, he said this, "My message and my preaching were not in persuasive words of wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power, so that your faith would not rest on the wisdom of men, but on the power of God." We're talking about a faith here that's Spirit-filled, that's powerful, and that's life-giving. We often say in youth ministry that you have to be real with teenagers because, well, they can tell when you're being fake. And it's true. Young people, including children, this, have that sense of that person not being real with me. And often children and young people have that sense better than most of us as adults, if not better. When I think about, reading this report and reading this article, obviously it gets introspective, and I start thinking about myself and, okay, what did my family do? My family background, did those 4 factors come into play here and there? And, yes, my family, I grew up in a Christian family. My family's still together. I'm not coming from a broken family either, and we did those things. We prayed before bedtime. We did the Bible stories before bedtime. We said grace together as a family. We held hands so that, we wouldn't start eating our food early before the grace was done, right? That's what you do. You got to control your kids. But, in reflecting on that, I can see now examples of my parents living out their faith that, for me, causes me to understand, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. That makes a difference in my life. For my dad, he was a music teacher. He taught junior high music, which I gotta think has got to be the most frustrating job of all time, teaching junior high students this band music. But he did it for 25 years. But at home, he played his guitar. And I remember him playing his guitar in our living room, and not so much in my older teenage years, but especially when I was a little kid. He would play this song. It was an old, I don't know if you know Randy Matthewson, this old kind of 1970s Christian rock dude. But he had this kind of a softer song called Over There. And my dad would play this song called Over There, and it was all about the hopes of heaven, the hopes of the new earth. And the chorus goes, "There will be no crying over there." And I remember him playing the song, and he played this pretty regularly. And for me, even recently, I rediscovered this song on YouTube. And just, the memories start flooding back, and the realness of my dad's faith just came through. And even just that one little example. I can think of an example of an uncle that I have who, when I was a little bit older, we were shingling on a roof, and we're just talking whatever, and he just mentions the Lord is a good God, and whatever, the weather is so perfect today, kind of thing. I don't remember exactly what the quote was, but that he brought the Lord into conversation just so naturally. It's always stuck with me. And it's crazy, because you probably have those memories too, where one little thing just sticks in your mind, sticks in your memory, and affects you completely and entirely when you have these people of faith who pass it down in that kind of organic way. But secondly, as a church, so that's the family, but secondly, as a church, we have to demonstrate that authenticity of faith as we move forward in ministry. Actually, as a church, we first have the responsibility to be a family for those who have no families or have broken families. And you know what? The interesting thing about young people is that they know, and often they easily admit that they have not arrived yet. They know that. They know that they have some growing to do, physically, obviously, but also emotionally and spiritually. They know they've still got stuff to learn. And if as adults, we're able to show young people that, hey, us too, we've still got room to grow. We've gotten as tall as we can get, but we've got some emotional place to grow. We've got some spiritual places to grow. We haven't arrived either. We've still got stuff to learn. That's a place where then our young people can see and can say, hey, yes, take notice of that and be like, hey, well, this is a place where I can belong. So as the family and as the church, for the sake of our children and young people, we need to be that cloud of witnesses. We need to be that people of faith, people of true faith, of real faith, of living faith, of authentic faith, faith that has power, that has life to it. It's got to be real and alive to us so that it can be modeled to our young people. Yeah, sure, we can read about Noah and Abraham and David in Hebrews 11 and in the Old Testament. We can read about those people of faith, and yes, they're inspiring too. But it's so much more of an impact when we see that example of authentic faith lived out in someone that we see, that we observe, someone that we respect and love. So I've got one last statistic for you before I end. And I've been at a youth conference one time, and I heard this statistic that a speaker had given, and he said this, that in North America, of all the people, young and old, who have committed their lives to Christ in a calendar year, 2/3 of those people will be teenagers. So he's saying that young people between the age of 13 and 19 make up approximately 66% of the total number of new followers of Jesus every year in North America. Now, if that number is anywhere close to being accurate, and I suspect it is, is it any wonder that the world targets our young people with their consumerism, with their advertising and marketing, and it's a generation that's just bombarded with lies and deceit? Is it any wonder that Satan is attacking our families and seeking to destroy our families? As the youth pastor here, can I ask you to partner with me in serving the young people of our church? Can I ask, would you press into God and continue to grow in your faith too, and demonstrating it to our young people that, this is real, that this faith is life? Would you continue to pray for our young people, pray for protection, and pray that they would grow? And in doing so, may we be that cloud of witnesses to them. Join me for prayer. Please stand. Father God in heaven, it is a good thing to be here, to be your church, to be families, to come to church. And God, I pray that as we hear these stats, as we read about these young people leaving church when they go off on their own, Lord, that you would continue to press in on us, to install your thoughts as our thoughts, and your heart in our heart, to serve the next generation, to serve the young people of our church, and to demonstrate what faith is, to be authentic people. God, I pray that you would show us those places where we can grow as parents, where we can grow as church attendees, and where we can demonstrate those places of faith to our young people. God, we long to see our young people involved and actively alive and excited about you. And so, Lord, we lift these things to you and praise you for the work that you are going to do. And we ask, Lord, that you would reign in us, that you would reign in our hearts, our minds, and all of us to be people of faith. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Stop.